The story of Waco is, without question, a tragedy. But it's also much more complicated than a story about a cult. The standoff between federal agents and the branch Davidians outside Waco, Texas, dominated the media headlines for several months. The siege that lasted more than a month left many people, including children, dead, and changed the way some Americans felt about the federal government. It's remembered as one of the darkest chapters in American law enforcement history. Almost 3 decades later, some of the branch Davidians who survived the raid are still believers, while a new church group has moved onto the land. If you want to know more about the roots of this religious cult, how it all started, and more importantly, how it ended, stick around, as we are about to unravel for you the story of the branch Davidians, with all the information that you need to know. But before we start, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell button to receive our latest notifications. The branch Davidians are one of many groups that carried out the work of Victor Houteff, who was a Bulgarian immigrant to the United States and a Seventh-day Adventist Sabbath school teacher in a local church in Southern California. He called for reform of the SDA Church. He presented his views in a book, The Shepherd's Rod, The 144,000, A Call for Reformation. Having been rebuffed by Adventist leaders, Houteff and his original followers settled near Waco, Texas in 1934 and became known as the Davidians. They began to prepare for what they believed was the return of Jesus, claiming that the Adventists had abandoned this task in favor of worldly pursuits. In 1942, the group was renamed to the General Association of Davidian Seventh-day Adventists, Davidian indicating the belief in the restoration of the Davidic Kingdom of Israel. Houteff died in 1955, but his group remained united. One of his followers, Benjamin Roden, claimed to be hearing messages from God telling him to continue Houteff's work, but he was succeeded by his wife, Florence. She not only continued his attempts to discern the signs of the end time and an imminent apocalypse, but also set a time frame for it, as the date of the dawn of the new Messianic age, beginning in March 1959. Hundreds of believers gathered at the Texas Center. The anticipated event did not occur, which led to the splintering of the movement into several factions. Following this disappointment, Benjamin Roden formed another group called the Branch Davidians and succeeded in taking control of Mount Carmel. When Benjamin Roden died in 1978, he was succeeded by his wife, Lois Roden. Members of the Branch Davidians were torn between alliance to Ben's wife, Lois Roden, and alliance to his son, George. After the death of Lois Roden in 1986, George Roden assumed the right to the leadership, but soon after, Vernon Howell rose to power, asserted his leadership, and became the head of the Mount Carmel community. Vernon Howell was a troubled child from an unstable family background. He was born to a teenage mother in 1959 and grew up in Texas. He claimed he had memorized both the New and Old Testaments of the Bible by the time he was 18 years old. He also claimed that God spoke to him and said, "You are the chosen one." Howell had become a born-again Christian in the 1980s. By 1983, Vernon joined the religious cult, and by the time he rose to power, he changed his name to David Koresh, suggesting his messianic task, and to Koresh, suggesting that his role was to destroy the enemies of God as King Cyrus had destroyed the Babylonians. Former followers said the compound had no running water, heat, or electricity, but they managed to install most of the basics. There was Bible study 3 times a day. Women had to wear long blouses, and no makeup or jewelry could be worn. They said Koresh would tell them where to sleep and what food they could eat. Sugar, processed flour, and dairy products were forbidden. Branch Davidian Cliff Doyle said Koresh had been interested in music, and Lois Roden encouraged him to continue singing and playing guitar, which became part of the group's daily Bible study sessions. Former followers said Koresh truly believed he was on a mission from God and was the only one who could interpret the Bible and its true meaning for the masses. Interpreting Revelation chapter 5 verse 2, Koresh identified himself with the lamb mentioned therein. This is traditionally believed to symbolize Jesus Christ. However, Koresh suggested that the lamb would come before Jesus and paved the way for his second coming. Doyle later stated that Koresh asked his followers, including married couples, to embrace celibacy. Then after a while, he announced all marriages in the group were dissolved and that from now on all of the women within the cult would be his wives if he wanted them. Even though Koresh was legally married to one woman, Rachel Jones, his justification for taking all the women was theological, of course, claiming he's the one that had the power and the authority to give the seed, adding that if he had sex with a woman, Koresh would say she was in the house of David. David Koresh thought that he was a Messiah, and that furthermore, any children born of the Messiah would be sacred. Because of this, he engaged in multiple marriages with the women in the Branch Davidian community, many of whom were underage, fathering at least 15 children. In the years following the massacre, a number of additional children who had grown up among the Branch Davidian community reported that Koresh had molested them at some point. Carrie Joel, who told ABC News in 2003 interview that her mother Sherry was one of Koresh's wives, said she herself became Koresh's youngest bride when she was just 10 years old, and later testified before Congress that Koresh molested her at a motel. By Joel's account, Koresh had as many as 20 wives by the time he died on April 19, 1993. Because many of Koresh's supposed wives were teenagers, the entire community was accused of child abuse. Soon those child abuse charges started attracting the legal authorities. Investigators also worried that the Branch Davidians might attack their neighbors or even Waco, fulfilling what they saw as the inevitable Armageddon, especially that they obtained a large amount of heavy guns. By 1992, Waco media outlets and ATF agents started investigating the Branch Davidians, and by 1993, ATF agents in Texas requested a search warrant for Mount Carmel, but decided to make a surprise forced entry rather than serve the warrant. The ATF attempted to breach the compound for approximately 2 hours, until their ammunition ran low. 5 Branch Davidians and 4 ATF agents were killed, and another 16 agents were wounded. After the raid, ATF agents established contact with Koresh and others inside the compound. The FBI took command after the death of federal agents and managed to facilitate the release of 19 children. On April 19, 1993, the FBI moved for a final siege of the compound, using large weaponry such as rifles and armored combat engineering vehicles to combat the heavily armed Branch Davidians. The FBI attempted to use tear gas to flush out the Branch Davidians. Officially, FBI agents were only permitted to return any incoming fire, not to actively assault the Branch Davidians. When several Branch Davidians opened fire, the FBI's response was to increase the amount of gas being used. Around noon of the same day, 3 fires broke out at the same time in different parts of the building. The government maintains that the fires were not deliberately started by Branch Davidians. Some Branch Davidian survivors claim that the fires were started either accidentally or deliberately by the assault. Of the 85 Branch Davidians in the compound when the final siege began, 76 died on April 19 in various ways, from falling rubble to suffocating effects of the fire, or by gunshots from fellow Branch Davidians. The siege lasted 51 days. Out on the grassy rise east of Waco, where it all happened, there is a new Branch Davidian community that has risen from the ashes. They call themselves the Lord Our Righteousness. 12 people live in a scattering of mobile homes. There is a new church, a dignified memorial to the dead, and a new leader. This sums it up and brings us to the end of today's story. But we would be glad if you shared your thoughts and opinions in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe, take care, and see you in the next video.